In the land of Amudo in Okwehi Kingdom, there lived a young woman named Chizoba. Chizoba was a very beautiful girl. Her beauty was the talk of the village. Her skin like a polished brass, her eyes like shining stars, and her voice a melody that could soothe the fiercest storm. But beneath the surface of her enchanting beauty, she harbored a heart colder than the mountain's winds. Men from corners of the land came to seek for her hand in marriage, bringing with them cattle, palm wine, and valuable gifts. Some traders, some farmers, and even the great warriors. But Chizoba in her pride rejected them all. She mocked the ones who dared approach her, calling them fools for thinking they could win her heart with trinkets and promises. "Do you think I'm like other women?" she would say arrogantly, her laughter echoing through the village. "I am destined for greatness, and I will not settle for just any man." Her refusal became infamous. Some said she was cursed, others said she had no interest in marriage. But the truth was far more mysterious. One warm evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, an old man appeared at the edge of the village. His appearance was strange. He was tall with long white hair that seemed to move like smoke in the breeze. His face was withered and worn, and his eyes gleamed with an uncertain otherworldly light. His name was Ndoka, and though he looked free, his presence held an undeniable power. No one could really tell where he came from. The villagers who had grown accustomed to the land's many might murmured among themselves, "That man is no ordinary mortal," they whispered. "He has the look of someone who walks between the living and the dead." But Chizoba was not bothered by the rumors. She sat under the shades of a large tree, braiding her hair as she watched Ndoka approach her. "You are Chizoba, the most beautiful woman in the land," Ndoka said, his voice low and rich like the earth itself. "I have come to ask for your hand in marriage." Chizoba, who had grown accustomed to men begging for her favor, let out a laugh that echoed through the village. "You old man want to marry me?" she asked, eyeing him with disdain. "You are nothing but a dust-covered relic. Do you think I would lower myself to be your wife?" The villagers gasped in shock. No one ever dared to insult Ndoka, and yet here she was mocking him openly. But Ndoka only smiled, his eye glinting with a hidden knowledge. "You may think yourself untouchable, Chizoba, but even the stars fall, and even the proudest tree is eventually struck by lightning. I will return for you." And with that, Ndoka turned and walked away. Days turned into weeks, and Chizoba went on with her life, secure in the knowledge that no man, no matter how powerful or wise, could ever win her heart. But then, strange things began to happen to her. Her reflection in the water started to change, becoming distant and unfamiliar. Like a shadow of herself, she would hear whispers in the land, voices calling her name in the dead of night, and feel a coldness in her room like someone or something was watching her. One evening, as she walked alone by the river, she heard a voice calling her name from the mist. It was soft at first, like the wind, but then it grew louder, clearer, until it was unmistakably Ndoka's voice. "Chizoba, come to me." Terrified, she ran back to the village. But Udoka's voice followed her, growing more distant with each step. She turned to see him standing at the edge of the river, his form now more solid, more real, his eyes once kind and ancient now burned with a strange intensity. "You cannot escape me," he said. "You have insulted the spirit world and now you belong to me. I am not the old man you saw, I am the spirit of the land, the one who guides the passage between the living and the dead. And you, Chizoba, have made a grave mistake." Before she could react, he raised his hand, and the world around her seemed to dissolve. The river, the trees, the village all faded into darkness, and she was pulled into a world she had never known. Chizoba awoke in a place unlike any she had ever seen. It was a land of shadows and erring light, where the ground was soft and damp, and the air was heavy with the scent of decay. She was no longer in her world, but in the land of the dead. "Welcome to my realm, Chizoba." Udoka's voice echoed around her. "This is where you will live now as my bride." Her heart pounded with fear. "No, take me back. I do not belong here." But Udoka's eyes burned with a cold fire. "You rejected the love of the living, and now you learn what it means to be bound to the spirit world. You will live here forever, but you will never be free, you are mine. The land of the dead was a place of endless wandering, a world of half-formed shadows where the spirit of the departed roamed aimlessly. There were no villages, no homes, only a vast barren expanse that stretched on forever. Chizoba quickly realized that she had made a terrible mistake in rejecting the men who had sought her hand, and worse, in insulting Nduka. Days turned into weeks and weeks to months. She learned that Nduka was not just an old man, but a powerful spirit who controlled the fate of souls. His domain was vast, and it had been watching her for years. Her beauty had drawn men, but it was her pride that had sealed her fate. But as the time passed, Chizoba's heart began to change. The loneliness of the land of the dead wore her down, and she came to understand the true meaning of love and humility. She wept for men she had turned away, for the people she had scorned, and for the life she could never return to. Nduka, watching from afar, saw her transformation. He had never truly wanted to trap her in this world. He had wanted to teach her a lesson, and now he saw that she learned it. "You have changed, Chizoba," he said one day, his voice softer than before. "You understand now what it means to be humble. You are ready." Chizoba looked up at him, her eyes filled with understanding and tears. "I am sorry for what I have done, Nduka. I was foolish, and I've learned my lesson. Will you let me go?" she asked. Nduka smiled, his form shifting like smoke in the wind. "I will release you, but remember, pride leads to downfall, and love is the only path to true greatness. Go back to the world of the living and be a woman of kindness, of humility. Teach others what you've learned." When Chizoba awoke, she was back in her village, standing by the river, just as she had been before. The sun has risen, and the birds were singing, but everything felt different now. The village seemed smaller, the people kinder, and her heart lighter. From that day forward, Chizoba was no longer the proud woman who had rejected every suitor. She became known as a wise and humble woman, one who had learned that beauty fades, but the soul is eternal. And though she would never forget the land of the dead, she lived the rest of her days in peace, sharing her story to remind others that pride comes before a downfall, and that the greatest power in the world is love.